Zok the Mishnah, beginning of Chazara, beginning of the parak. Should be B'siyata D'Shmaya, Zayin Amud Aleph. We'll try to cover the parak. The beginning, I think, might go a little slower just because more of us were not here for the beginning. If you have any questions, we'll hold it for afterwards. We'll try to get the a'amud in about 15 to 20 minutes. Yeah, Chaz, from the beginning every week. This is hot stuff. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. That's the way to go. So we're about to start the parak. Any questions? I'm going to try to get the a'amud done in 15 to 20 minutes. Then we can Chazara b'chavrus, however much you get. And if you weren't here when we learned it the first time, it's likely you're going to need some clarification. So I'll be here for that. Let's try to get to the next Mishnah today. Says the Mishnah, Eloi Nago, the following people go to Golos. Someone that kills b'shogeg. The Mishnah is going to give us 3 examples that are chayiv, 3 examples that are pater. The rule is always going to be if the weapon was moving downwards, that's going to be chayiv. The weapon was moving upwards, it's going to be pater. Says the Mishnah, if he was pushing down a smoother, magilo is a type of tool they use to smooth their roofs out. And it fell on a victim and it killed him. Or case number 2, as a person was lowering a barrel from the roof. On the bottom, and it fell on the victim and it killed him. Or case number 3, if the killer was walking down, climbing down a ladder, and he himself fell on the victim and he killed him, we'll go to Golos. However, here we're going to have 3 cases where the weapon was moving upwards, the bottom of א-עמוד Aleph. Although the bottom, the Mishnah there. 2 lines to the bottom. However, Moishich means he was pulling it upwards. That's the key. He was going upwards. Magilo is this tool which smooths the roof. So if he's pulling them smoother upwards, and it fell on the victim and it killed him. Or the second case that's going to be pater is he was pulling up a barrel from the ground up to the roof. The rope snapped him, and it fell on the victim and it killed him. Or a third case, is going up a ladder, and he himself fell on the victim and it killed him. He's not going to go to Golos. And the reason is this is the rule. Now, really, right now the Mishnah could have stopped and we would have understood that if it's moving downwards, he's chayiv, moving upwards is pater. But the Mishnah is going to summarize it, and the Gemara is going to tell us that the summary is coming to tell us the chiddush. But this is the rule. The summary is kol shebederech yiridas. Anytime it's on the way downwards, goyle will go to Golos. V'shaloi bederech yiridas. If it's not on the way downwards, ein goyle is not going to go to Golos. So what do we have from the Mishnah? Down is chayav Golos, up is pater. The Gemara starts off. What's the source for that din? How do we know this din that it has to be going downwards? Derech Yerida. How do we know that it has to be Derech Yerida in order to be Chayav Golos? Omar Shmuel says Shmuel, Omar Krab, because the pasuk says, quote, Vayapel olav vayomois, end quote. He will make it fall down on him, and he will die. This is describing the accident that the killer made something fall down. Moving downwards is more likely for something to fall, so that's called making it fall. So we learn from there is not going to be Chayav Ad unless he falls Derech Nefila in a way that's usual to fall. The Gemara is going to bring a brayso that's going to give us a few cases that are going to be pater. Taner Rabbanan in line 5, the Rabbanan told us in a brayso. The pasuk says, quote unquote, it happened b'shkoga, end quote. The story happened by accident. Says the brayso, pratis will exclude lamezid, a case that it happened on purpose. We're going to see exactly what that means. Next, the pasuk continues and says, it happened b'li das, without knowledge, without intent, end quote. Says the brayso, pratis will exclude l'mischav and somebody that killed with intention. End of brayso. Now the Gemara is going to go back and analyze each point of the brayso. The Gemara is going to say, this brayso doesn't seem to be telling me anything. Mazid, if he killed with mazid, he's pater. Pshita, that's obvious. Bar Katolo, he's going to be chayav misa. Of course he's not going to Golos. On that the Gemara answers, Amar Rava says, Rava, you know what the brayso meant? Eima, I'll tell you, it means, prat, we're excluding l'oimer mutter. A case where a person thought it was mutter to kill, and he killed. So now he's not going to be chayav misa because he thought that what he was doing was allowed. However, he is considered a mazid, therefore he will not go to Golos. Omerle Abayas said to Rava, is that how you're defining the word mazid? If it's talking about someone that was thought it's mutter, oimer mutter, he said it's mutter, onasu. The brayso would call him an oinus. Oinus meaning a complete and total accident. He had no idea. The brayso wouldn't call him a mazid. So Rava said back to him, Shani Oimer, I can explain it like that. Shani Oimer, because I say, Hoimer mutter, if somebody thinks it's mutter to kill, Karev l'mezidu. He is close to being a mazid, and therefore the brayso could refer to him as a mazid. Let's continue. The brayso said, quote unquote, bivli das, the words bivli das, when the pasuk said he killed without knowledge, prat l'mischav, and that came to exclude somebody that killed with intent. Mischav l'lashon kavana, So it excludes somebody that killed with intent that he's not going to go to Galus. So again, the Gemara asks, Mischaven, if he killed with intent Pshita, it's obvious that he's not going to go to Galus, because Bar Katolu, the person is Chayav Misa for what he did. He killed intentionally. Amar Rabba says, Rabba, it's talking about a case where he killed intentionally, but he's not Chayav Misa. What's that case? Prada will exclude from Galus the case L'Mischaven L'Aragas Abehema, where a person intended to kill an animal, V'Aragas Adam, turned out that he killed a person. Or L'Nachri intended to kill a guy, V'Aragas Yisrael, and it turned out he killed a Jew. Or L'Nefel intended to kill a child that was not going to survive. This was a preemie that was born at a time that he could not survive. V'Harag ben Kayama, and he killed a child that could have survived. So in all these cases, he killed with intent. So he's not going to be Chayav Galus. He's also not Chayav Misa because he wasn't trying to kill somebody whose murder would be Chayav Misa. You're going to try killing an animal, or a guy, or a child that wasn't able to survive, and he killed a healthy Jew. So in those cases, he's not going to be Chayav Misa because he was not trying to kill someone who there's a Chayav Misa for. Yet on the other hand, he's not going to be Chayav Galus either because it was intentional. Says the Gemara Vayter. Shalom Aleichem Malka. Should pass the Gemara. Chazara on line 14 on a'Amud Beis.
I just have one question.
Or pass the candy. Either a Gemara or the candy. You got to keep him busy. Right? Seltzer?
No, I'm good.
You're good. Okay, help yourself to the fridge.
I had a quick question.
Yes.
The Mischaven over here is different. It's a different case, but the Mischaven over here is less.
It's not
But by the
First gets mazed.
yeah, we see you're saying Mischaven is a different type. We when we say Mischaven, we assume that it meant Mischaven that he had in mind to do what he was doing because we said Bivli Das is the opposite of Mischaven. Now it sounds like Mischaven is not the opposite of Bivli Das. It's a certain type of Bivli Das.
No, but Bivli Das means when he killed, he did it without knowledge that he's killing.
Right.
He didn't know that he was killing. In this case, the guy knew that he's killing. He just thought he's killing someone who's patur.
It's similar. Okay, it's closer to.
It's closer to Das.
Yeah, than
to Bivli Das than we originally thought.
Yeah,
that's correct.
As
right.
opposed to the first place, it's
right. 100%. It's true, but it's still good enough that we can darshan it. Okay, up to Tanur Rabban, about 14 lines in a'Amud Beis. We're moving a little quickly tonight because it's Chazara. So, but that's what we do. That's what we do, meaning Chazara, not that's what we do, moving quickly. Says the Gemara, Tanur Rabban, we're going to learn the Brisa. The Brisa is going to give us a whole bunch of cases that either are included in the din of Galus or are excluded from the din of Galus. And each one is based on a couple of words from a pasuk, so quotation marks. If you're using an old Gemara that you used last time, great, because you'll have the quotation marks. Otherwise, you got to just pay attention to where the pasuk begins and ends. Tanur Rabban, the Rabban Torah Sene Brisa. The pasuk says, quote, Im befesa, end quote. If the accident happened suddenly, which means this accident was not something which could have be prevented earlier, then there will be galus. Right? The case of the pasuk is he's swinging an axe and something goes flying and it kills either the axe head or the piece of wood, which we're going to see in tomorrow's Chazara, went flying and it killed, then he will be chayav galus. Pratis will exclude the case of Lekaren Zavis, where he was killed at a corner. And Rashi or Ritva explained that the case being killed at a corner was two people were walking towards one corner, towards one intersection. There was a building or something blocking. The killer did not see the victim walking towards him. The killer was holding a knife, and he was just walking holding his knife. The victim saw the killer coming, and the victim could have prevented it. So this accident is not something which happened at the time of the tragedy. Rather, this was something which was preventable much earlier, and the victim did not pay attention to avoid the killer walking there, and therefore there's going to be no gullus. It's not considered a sudden accident. It's considered like a long drawn-out mistake, and therefore it's not going to go to gullus. The pasuk continues, quote, B'lo Eva, end quote. The killing happened without hatred. That teaches us prat, this excludes l'sayna, an enemy, that if an enemy kills, he will not go to Galus. More about that later in the parak, exactly what the case is. The pasuk continues, quote unquote, hadafai. One more word of the pasuk. Pasuk said if he pushed him. So this will include shadachfai begufai. If he pushed him with his own body, you may have thought that that's too negligent. Watch where your arms and legs are going. Says the pasuk, no, even if he pushed him, as long as it was an accident, he will be chayav Galus. The pasuk continues, quote, Oy hishlich olav, end quote, or he threw something down at him. So it's emphasizing the down again. We already knew that it has to have downwards motion from the beginning of the a'Amud. Why is the pasuk emphasizing again that it was moving downwards, end quote? Says the pasuk, says the Brisa, Lahavi, it's coming to bring a case of Yerida, where something was moving downwards, Sheitzayr Chaliyah, for the purpose of moving upwards. The example we give is if the guy's trying to chop a branch over his head. So he lowers the axe and then swings upwards. If in the downward motion he killed somebody, he will be chayil. Even though the killer's focus was on the upwards movement, and upwards he's always pater, but since in the process of moving upwards he first moved downwards, that would be considered a downward motion, and he will be chayil. The pasuk continues. The end of line 17, the last word, quote, Beloit Sidia, end quote. So here, the next two drashas have a literal meaning and a remez, a hint in the pasuk. So the literal meaning of Beloit Sidia, without ambush, means he wasn't, he wasn't trapping this guy to kill him. But we are going to read it as if the word says Beloit Sad, without going to the wrong side. So pratis will exclude a case lemischaven, where the killer intended to throw something Litzad zed to one side, to his right, v'holcholon and went Litzad acher, to the other side. In a case where it was misdirected, he will be pater. Meaning he's only going to be chayav galus if he tried throwing it to his right and it went to his right, he just didn't realize that there's a person there. But if he tried throwing it to his left and it went to his right, he's going to be pater. The pasuk continues with another similar drasha quote, Ba'asher lo yitzada, end quote, someone that did not ambush. Again, we're going to read it as if it says tzad. So it's as if it says Asher lo tzad. He was not trying to throw it right by his side. Pratis will exclude from Golos. Lemischav and someone that intended Lizroik Shtein to throw something only 2 amos. He tried to throw it very close by. Vizorak Arba, but he ended up throwing it 4 amos. He underestimated his strength and he overthrew. So in that case, he will be pater. The pasuk continues, quote, V'asher yovoy esre'eu bayar, end quote. When the pasuk is giving us an example that a person is going to be chayav golos, it starts off the story, Asher yovoy esre'eu will come upon his friend bayar in the forest, end quote. So the emphasis is on the word bayar, I have it underlined, that the pasuk is designating a specific place that this story, this tragedy happened. Says the Gemara, what are we learning from that? Ma'yar, just like a forest, is a place which is unique, because there is rishus, there is permission granted lenizik for the victim ulamazik and the killer likanis l'sham to enter there. It's a place that's free for anyone to enter. Avkol. So to every case of galos is only going to be chayav if there is rishus, if there was permission granted lenizik for the victim ulamazik and the killer likanis l'sham to enter there. That's the end of the brayso. That's the first half of this *Amud. The second half of the *Amud is going to discuss a specific case. Going back to our rule that a person is only chayav golos if the weapon is moving upwards, but if the weapon is moving downwards. But if the weapon is moving upwards before the accident, there is no golos. The Gemara is going to find a hybrid case, a case where there really is some upward and some downward motion. What is that case? A person is going up a ladder, and as he is stepping up the ladder, he steps on the rung. They got an old rickety wooden ladder, and the rung sags downwards. And then after it's already sagging, it got dislodged, right? The design of a ladder is, you have the 2 vertical posts, they have a bunch of holes aligned with each other, you have these rungs going from one vertical post to the other vertical post, and one of them slipped out of its socket and fell down and killed. So now the person was purely moving upwards, but the weapon turns out to be the rung of the ladder, and that weapon was moving downwards with the sagging motion of the person stepping on it. So the Gemara is going to ask, do I focus on what the person is doing, the killer himself is doing, or do I zone in locally on the weapon itself? Says the Gemara. And this question was asked by Rabbi Vo from Rabbi Yochanan. Just about in the middle of the page, maybe a line above them, midway point. 2 lines above the midway point. Boy Menei Rabbi Vo Rabbi Yochanan. Line 23. Rabbi Vo asked the following Shiloh of Rabbi Yochanan. If a person's going up a ladder, V'nishmita shliva, on the rung slipped out mitachta from underneath him. V'nafla, and the rung fell, not the person, but the rung fell. V'hargan, it killed. Ma, what is the din? Ki ai gavna, in a case like this, aliyahi. Is this considered derech aliyah? And here it's important to point out, why would it be considered going upwards? Because I'm looking specifically at the person, and he is moving upwards. Or yiridahi, or is it considered derech yirida? Is he moving downwards? Because I'm looking at the rung. Omar lei. So Rabbi Yochanan responds, he says, Kvar nogata, you just touched upon a case. B'yerida, of going downwards, she'itzarech aliyah, for the purpose of going upwards, and therefore you're going to be chayav. Let's just explain this point. We saw earlier in the brayso that if a person is moving something down with the intention of going upwards, he's swinging the axe down in order to swing upwards, even though the main focus was the upward motion, if in there I could microanalyze it, put it in slow motion, and I see there is some downward, so the downward is going to be chayav. On the downswing is chayav. Says on the wind up, right? Says Rabbi Yochanan, this is very similar. Because here, it's true that the person's focus is on climbing up the ladder, but if you analyze the exact motion, there is the sagging of the rung, and that is moving downwards. So therefore, I'm looking at that specific movement. Since the specific movement is downwards, he will be chayav. So Rabbi Yochanan wants to draw a parallel, and he says, just like when the guy is swinging the axe down on the wind-up, he's chayav, so to this person's moving up the ladder, but the rung is sagging, should be chayav. That was Rabbi Yochanan's suggestion. Rabbi Avo is not happy with it. Let's just go back to Rabbi Yochanan, line 26. Amar Lei, 2 lines back. Kvar Nogata, you just touched upon a case. B'yerida of going downwards, Sheit Tzarech Aliyah, for the purpose of going upwards. And we know in that case, Chayav is Chayav. Says the Gemara, line 27. Esive, or Esve, if you're Yeshivish, right? The dictic pronunciation is Esive. Esive means he asked him. Esve means he asked. But Esive, he asked him. The Mishnah finished off with a summary. The summary of the Mishnah was, after it gave us 3 examples of going down that are chayav, 3 examples of going up that are patur, the Mishnah finished off with the following summary. Quote, Zeh haklal, this is the rule. Kol shebet derech yiridasai, anytime it's on the way downwards, goyle will go to galus. Shaloi b'derech yiridasai, if it's not on the way downwards, eina goyle does not go to galus, end quote. So the Mishnah gave us what's apparently an unnecessary summary at the end. If it's not on the way downwards, he's not going to galus. So the Rabbi Avo is understanding that that's coming to introduce us to a case that you might have said he's chayav, and I'm trying to tell you, no, if it's not on the way downwards purely, then he will not be chayav galus. What was that? Purely is the key, right? So Rabbi Avo says in line 29, the third word, Shaloi b'derech yiridaseh, those last 3 words, Shaloi b'derech yiridaseh, if it's not purely on the way downwards, the Yisuya Mai. What's that coming to tell me? What case of putter is that coming to tell me? Lav, isn't it so? Li Yisuya, it's coming to include in putter, ki hai gavna, that stands for a case like this. It's coming to include a case like this to tell us that even though the rung is moving downwards, since the person was going upwards, he's putter. That's what Rabbi Avo wants to derive from our Mishnah. Says Rabbi Yochanan to him. That's the end of Rabbi Avo's words. Says Rabbi Yochanan to him, Utamech, according to you, according to you, Rabbi Avo, that you are trying to derive something from the summary of the Mishnah. You're ignoring another part of the summary. What was the first half of the summary? First half of the summary said, any case that is on the way down will be chayav. That's coming to add a case of chayav. So, Tamech, according to you, when the Mishnah said, quote, Kol shebederech yiridasai, end quote, anything on the way down is chayav. Lisuyemai. What was that coming to include? Just like you're telling me, the Mishnah is telling me a chiddush, an extra case that's patur, the Mishnah is also telling me an extra case that's chayav. So explain that first. Says Rabbi Yochanan has a suggestion. He says, I'll tell you what both of them are talking about. Ella, rather, Lisuyeh, it's coming to add a case of chayav. Lisui means coming to include. It's including a case that's chayav by katza, by a butcher. And we'll see what that is in a moment. Hochanami, so too when the Mishnah said there's a new case of patur, Lisui, it's coming to include a case of patur of katza by a butcher. Rabbi Yochanan says the entire summary of the Mishnah is just coming to tell you what's the halacha in a butcher shop. That sometimes the butcher is going to be chayav even though you may think he should be patur, and sometimes he's going to be patur even though you might think that he's going to be chayav. But before we're going to see what that case is, Rabbi Yochanan is going to bring 4 braisos. And the brisa is going to discuss if a butcher killed in front of him while he was chopping meat or behind him while he was chopping meat. And the first brisa is going to say in front of him he's chayav, but behind him he's patur. Second brisa is going to say, if he killed someone behind him he's chayav, but in front of him he's patur. Third brisa is going to say whether he killed behind him or in front of him he's chayav. And the fourth brisa is going to say both of them are patur. So we have a 4-way contradiction. And Rabbi Yochanan is going to resolve this by explaining that there are different steps in the motion of chopping meat. And sometimes it's chayav in the front, sometimes patur, sometimes chayav behind, sometimes patur. But let's just see the 4 braisos here. This goes quickly, it's all the same translation over again and again. Says the Gemara de Tanya, line 32, the last 8 or so narrow lines. The Tanya learned in a brisa. This is brisa number 1. Katzav shoya mekatzev. First one's a noun, next one's a verb. Katzav, a butcher. Shoya mekatzev, that was chopping. Tani chadu learned in one brisa, lefon of chayav. If you killed someone in front of him, he's chayav golos. Lachrov, if you killed someone behind him, patur is patur. But Tanya, we learned in the second brisa number 2. La'achar of chayav, if he killed someone behind him, he's chayav. Lefana pater, if he killed someone in front of him, he is pater. But Tanya, we learned in a third brisa. Bein lefana, bein la'achar, whether he killed in front of him or behind him, chayav is going to be chayav. But Tanya, we learned in a fourth brisa. Bein lefana, bein la'achar, whether he killed in front of him or behind him, pater is pater. So we have 4 different versions of the dinam of a butcher. But loy kasha, says Rabbi Yochanan, there's no kasha here at all. And here, there's a long Rashi here, but we're just going to describe it outside. Rashi describes the motions of a butcher. He's got his meat cleaver sitting on the table, and there are 5 steps in the swing of the butcher. He takes the meat cleaver. First step is downwards, just to straighten out his arms, so he gets good. Right? If you have any of you go golfing, right, you got to make sure the elbow is straight. Right? So he straightens out his arm, down swing. Then he moves up, down, up, and chop. That's how he gets the most force, the smoothest momentum. Right, so again, he goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, the only direction that he's moving with intent to move in that direction is number 5. That's the goal. The goal is to get that hard downswing to chop the meat. But in order to get the downswing, he has to go up behind him. In order to go up behind, he has to first go down behind. In order to go down behind, he's got to go up in front. In order to go up in front, he's got to start down in front. So really, each step is there for the next step. He's moving down in order to be able to swing upwards, up in order to go down behind, down in order to go up in order to get his final goal of swinging downwards. That's all if you play it in slow motion. So the Gemara is going to say, we always just analyze, up is always going to be pater, down is always going to be chayav. Even though the first 2 downward swings are for the purpose of moving up, and the 2 upward swings are for the purpose of moving down, I don't care what his end purpose is, I care about what's happening right now. Says the Gemara V'loi Kasha. Where am I here? The last 5. Line 36, the last 5 narrow lines. V'loi Kasha, there's no steer. Khan, the first Bryce is talking about B'yirida Shalafanav, going down in front of him. Ba'aliyah Shalach, or going up behind. Khan, the second Bryce is talking about Ba'aliyah Shalafanav, going up in the front. B'yirida Shalach, and down behind. That's why he's only chayav behind. Khan, the third Bryce is talking about B'yirida Shalafanav B'shalachrav, when it's going down in the front and behind, so he's chayav by both. Khan, the fourth Bryce is talking about Ba'aliyah Shalafanav Vishalachrav, when it's going up in the front and up behind, there is going to be pater by both. So we have no proof from our Mishnah if the case of the rung slipping out is going to be chayav pater. We're still left with this question. So let's just go back to our original question of Rabbi Vo. A guy's going up a ladder, the rung sags. Question is, do I look at the person or do I look at the rung? If I look at the person, he's moving upwards and therefore will be pater. If I look at the rung, that's moving downwards and therefore he will be chayav. The Gemara in the last 5 lines to the Mishnah is going to suggest that this is actually machlokes Tana between 2 braysos. Says the Gemara, lema. Anytime it starts something with the word lema is a suggestion which will usually be knocked off afterwards. Says the Gemara, lema, let us say kitanoi, that this is actually machlokes between 2 Tana. Because if a person was going up a ladder, and the rung slipped out from underneath him. So Tani Chada, one brisa says chayav, the person's going to be chayav. But Tanya Idach, and another brisa says pater, the person's going to be pater. So just by face value, one says chayav, one says pater. Says the Gemara, what's going on here? My love, isn't it so? Baha kamiflagi. This is what they're arguing about. The Mar Savar, the Tana that says chayav, the first brisa holds, we look at the rung, and therefore yiridahi, it's considered moving downwards, and that's why I said chayav. Umar Savar, and the second brisa, I don't know, I don't have first and second written in here. Write it in, give me a second. Umar Savar, the second brisa holds, the second brisa said he's pater, holds, we look at the person, and aliyah, the person was going upwards, and by upwards, the halach is always pater. That's what the Gemara suggests. The Gemara is going to have 3 answers to this to say that it's not really a machlokes, and we are not going to resolve what the din is by the rung slipping out of the ladder. The first suggestion the Gemara is going to say is as follows: Loi, there was no such machlokes. Rather, the kule alma, everybody agrees aliyahi, that when you have a person going up a ladder and the rung slips out, we look at the person and therefore it is derech aliyah. It's considered moving upwards. So now, if it's considered moving upwards, what should the din be? He should be pater. Still, the first brisa says chayav. Right? If we're looking at the person moving upwards, should not be chayav galus. Still, the first brisa says chayav. The Gemara is going to explain the first brisa was not talking about galus. First brisa was talking about a case where the rung slipped out and damaged somebody. There, it makes no difference if it's upwards or downwards. So, of course, we look at the person. Person was moving upwards. This is considered an upward motion. V'loi kasha, says the end of the second wide line. There's no kasha why the first brisa said he's chayav. Because kan, the first brisa which said chayav is talking about linizkin. Where damage, it didn't kill anybody. It didn't say it's chayav galus. It just said chayav. Chayav coming is chayav to pay for the damage. And paying for the damage a person pays even if it was moving upwards. And kan, the second brisa, which says pater, is talking about legalus. So if a person's going up a ladder, the rung slips out, it's considered derech aliyah, and therefore he's going to be chayav for any damage that happened. He's going to be pater for any killing that happened. That was the first teretz. Ibay seima. Again, so according to the first teretz, it comes out that what do we look at, the person or the rung? What are we always going to look at? We're always going to look at the person. And we're going to consider it going upwards. Just by damage, even if it's going upwards, he's still chayav. But the person is the focus. The next two terutzim in the Gemara are going to take the other position. Maybe we really look at the rung. And it's always considered derech yerida, if the rung is sagging. The reason why one brisa said he's pater, even though the rung normally moves downwards, is because that brisa was talking about a rung which was very solid. It was very strong. And when he stepped in it, it didn't sag. So there was no downward motion. Says the Gemara, Ibay say more, I can tell you. If you want, I'll answer as follows. Hava halagalos. Both brises are talking about that a person got killed. Veloy kash. And we look at the rung. This is important. The Gemara doesn't speak it out, but the Mepharshim speak it out. We look at the rung, and therefore, if the rung is sagging downwards, it would be considered derech yerida. However, veloy kasha. There is no stira. The first price that said chayav is talking about the asliya. The rung was a little wormy. It was rotten wood. So as he stepped in it, it sagged down. So therefore, it's derech yerida. The second brisa, which says he's pater, is talking about the loya sliya. The rung was not wormy at all. It was solid wood, and therefore, when he stepped in it, did not sag at all. And since it didn't sag at all, there is no derech yerida here, and therefore he's pater. V'ibay seima, very similar teretz, the third teretz. Another option that I can explain the two brises to not be a machlokes. Both brises are talking about the loya sliya, that the rung was not wormy, it was solid wood. However, even solid wood, if the socket that it's attached to is a little bit loose, then it will still move downwards when you step on it. The loy kasha, there is no stira. The second brise, which says he is pater, is talking about the mihedek, when the rung in the socket was tight. So therefore, when he stepped in it, it didn't move downwards. So even though I look at the rung is not moving downwards, so he's pater. But the first brise that said he's chayav is talking about the loy mehedek. The rung was not tight, and therefore when he stepped on it, it sagged downwards. So in summary, the first teretz of the Gemara says we always look at the person, and the only time you're ever going to be chayav is if it damaged and it didn't kill. However, the second brisa, the second teretz and the third teretz, they both say we look at the rung. If the rung is moving downwards, then of course he's going to be chayav galus. But either the rung wasn't moving downwards because it was solid wood, and the case that was moving downwards was rotten wood, or the rung wasn't moving downwards because it was tight in the socket. The case it was moving downwards, it was a little loose, and when he stepped on it, it moved downwards. Okay, we don't leave much time for. And then it fell out, right?
In the first case.
The first case, it was solid and it just slipped out, but it never moved downwards. Again, let's just end the